Hello, guys. So I'm also a fellow Texan, so I feel like today was just like Texas Day. Yeah, we're based here in Austin, Texas, so thank you for coming to this wonderful, great city. And I'm actually like a retransplant because I've been living in New York for 13 years, and I just moved back to Texas, so I'm very excited to be back, very excited to be here during South by and during the Brand Insider Summit, so it's a really fun time to be here. But this isn't about me. I'm just the moderator today. And we've got some great brands here to talk to you guys about this world of data. I think we've said data so many times today that I don't even really think I remember what it is or what it means. And it's just this big, world and this big word, and it can get really complicated. But we've got some guys here to talk to you guys really about how do we take something that's super complicated and can be this massive problem and really just drill down and talk about small things that you can do that make a big impact. So I've got David, Martha, and Don here. I'll introduce you guys quickly, and then I just want to stop talking so you guys can start talking. But David here works at Gamut, which is the part of the Grandeur brand. He's more of a data analyst kind of guy, so we're really excited that he's on the panel. I've got Martha here. You guys have already heard from her a couple of times already today. She works at 3M, and she leads pretty much all of the brands at 3M for Latin America. And she's a little bit more of our creative voice. And then Don here at DraftKings. I'm sure you guys have heard of DraftKings. It's a daily fantasy sports app you guys are worldwide, and you're pretty much the #1 app in the marketplace. So lots of great brands up here, lots of great things we're going to talk about. But first, I just want to get us all on the same page. What do we mean when we're talking about little data, because that's the name of our panel, right? Like little data in practice. So what is little data to you guys?
Start first. So I guess like definitions are important, right? Like, that's how we communicate. I would say simply that little data is uncomplicated data. So conversely, like big data is complicated data. I would say that small data is data that humans can understand, whereas big data only machines can understand, and maybe some data scientists. The data scientists I know are more machines than people, so like I think that still applies. But I think the application of small data is a focus on fundamentals, whereas like the application for big data is building on that foundation to understand complex things about customers and like take action on that. So foundational versus like building upon that foundation.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yes, to your point, data, small data, it's very actionable data. It's that data that we have every day in our computers. It can be that point of sale Excel file. It can be the results of your social campaign or that data that you're generating every time. So it's that data that can let you go to the root cause of what is happening and why, and you can take really fast decisions versus big data where you are reaching more predicting the consumer behavior, or there are loads of data that you really need a machine to help you understand that data.
I won't be redundant. I would say simple and actionable are definitely how I would define little data, and it's not boiling the ocean, but boiling down an insight that identifies a problem to solve that you can actually tactically solve immediately, as opposed to trying to turn an aircraft carrier around, which is, I think, what big data helps you do in terms of pointing you in the right direction. So more tactical, actionable, and simple.
Yeah, I think, did you have something?
Yeah, actually, so to build on that, I was actually on a panel for big data a few years ago, so this is kind of like a complete reversal for that. But a lot of the things that I tried to leverage big data for didn't work. So I think small data is really going back to the basics and validating that the inputs that we are feeding into systems that generate big data insight is actually legitimate and would actually spit out a result that we expect. So yeah, that focus back on fundamentals is extremely important.
So as a marketer, how do you know when to use big data versus little data? Just you brought it up, so okay. You don't have to answer it, obviously, but sure. Like how do I know when I'm supposed to use the little data versus the big data?
I guess for me it was when I realized that leveraging the big data wasn't getting the results that I was expecting. So it was at a point where I wouldn't bet my job that I really understood the inputs to that big data. So it went all the way back to the beginning of what data actually exists, how is it connected to each other, how does that flow across systems, and how do we leverage that to facilitate engagements with customers. And we use that then to build upon algorithms, machine learning, and that kind of stuff.
Okay. Anybody
from a creative standpoint, to me it's all about little data. Again, like just what is the problem that we have to solve? What can I do with the creative piece that I'm making today or the brand strategy that I'm working on? We're a data-driven organization. It's hugely, hugely important to us. But we can also, we all can suffer from paralysis by analysis, and it's really trying to identify what matters, what can we do today, and how does that ladder up to the big data direction that we're headed down with the massive information we have.
And I also think that if you're in a company that right now is more focused on efficiencies and you don't have that much budget to acquire specific technologies, small data can make you build that foundations. And then if you are building those foundations and you're up there, now it's time to start investing on higher technology to process all these big volumes of data. But I think it's great if you are focusing right now in efficiency, it can be a great tool.
Yeah, I mean, when we were all talking, you guys all had like a really great story about how you used little data to really like impact your business in a pretty big way. So Martha, if you could just share what you've done at 3M with little data that's had such an impact at the company.
Yes, I have the privilege to lead the Scotch-Brite brand for Latin American market. And I want you to picture a woman from Latin America called Elena. She's 45 years old. She has 3 children and she loves cooking. But this is Latin American dishes. So it's going to be maybe enchiladas, it's going to be tacos, it's going to be like really greasy food sometimes. So when she is preparing this meal in her family, everyone's super happy because of the delicious meal, but now it's time to clean the dishes. So we run the Cantor panel to really analyze the frequency purchase and the household penetration we have with them. But first, we go and ask them, Elena, how often do you change your scrub? When it's time to change your scrub? And she tells us, oh, I change my scrub once a month. But then when we go with the Cantor panel and we see the frequency purchase, we see that she changes her scrub every 4 months for the whole category. But not only that, she changes for our brand every 6 months. So that means that only twice a year she buys Scotch-Brite products. So in this thing, we realized 3 main things. The first one is that our consumer doesn't know when it's really the time to change the scrub. The second one is that we have an opportunity to increase the frequency purchase of our product. And the third one is that we can educate the whole category, because I don't know if you knew, but Scotch-Brite invented the category. We are the first and primary owners of the category, so it's on our responsibility to educate and grow the category. So we're starting to develop programs to educate the consumers without offending them, of course, about when it's time to change the scrub. And we're taking the best of digital by geo-targeting consumers in a very short range across the supermarket, so they can be impacted through media and get an ad of when it's time to change the scrub. In that way, we're leveraging that little data like geo-targeting, like knowing how many consumers you have around in a specific area. We're also making a lot of A/B testings on the content performance of our campaigns. And We are using right now Adobe Analytics, and I really like it because it helps you track your media efforts, so you can see very easily what efforts are bringing you more traffic to your website and to those contents. So it's a very easy way to measure your investments, like programmatic is performing better, or it's Facebook, or what platform is performing better. So that's the way we're covering it.
Thanks. And Don, with DraftKings?
Trying to think of a really good example.
You have so many.
We collect tons of information, and one of the interesting things we found when we were looking and analyzing our economy was that the #1 reason people would keep coming back and playing over and over was if they won something. So most of our big mass advertising is about not the promise of, but the possibility that you can win $1 million playing fantasy sports. Fact of the matter is, one person wins that every week during NFL season, but there's tons of other winners that earn a lot less money. And in retrospect, a little insight, a data point, like the #1 reason people come back is because you've won, is surprisingly obvious. It's like a good joke. You know, when someone says a good joke, you're like, oh God, that's so true. I wish I'd thought of it. You feel like you could have thought of it. I think that's what little data really does, is help identify those truths. And so what we wrote a little creative line that said, what do we call the person that finishes in 800th place? A winner. And not many people out there knew that our payout curve went much even deeper than 800 in a lot of our contests. But what it did was reinforce to people that you can win by playing DraftKings, not just as a retention tool, but when we put that out into our acquisition marketing, we found that there was a great response to that. So it's just a good example of a tiny piece of data that was lost in a sea of a lot of other information that once we leaned into it, we were able to build our business around it.
Awesome.
Yeah, and so my last 2 roles was actually managing marketing functions for 2 of the largest or top 10 internet retailers, Granger's number 10. And we weren't really able to understand something that we've done at Gamut, which is so simple that I'm almost embarrassed to say it, but essentially we've taken our Salesforce data. So we have Salesforce and we have Google Analytics, and we chose those for a reason, because like they're integrated within their ecosystems. And we've connected the subscriber IDs within Salesforce and connected that with the Google Analytics client IDs. Incredibly simple, but now we're able to understand, did someone open the email, did they call the call center, and did they have a good experience? Did they click on a non-branded paid search ad? Did they see a display ad, and like what did they see? And we can connect all of that together now at an individual user level. And what that facilitates is, in my past life, we partnered with attribution companies, spent a lot of money and a lot of time trying to understand attribution, and it never worked. And one of my hypotheses is it didn't work because we didn't even have that base, simple data connected to each other. So that's a massive win, and the possibilities from that are pretty exciting. One of my favorites is if someone called the call center and they had a really bad experience, we can now negate them on any or all marketing channels across the board, which we didn't have the visibility into that before. So
I think that's awesome. You guys have all kind of touched on this a bit, but it's really about doing, we talked about this as well, but it's really about doing something really, really well, and focusing your effort. So to your point, you guys kept trying to do all these attribution vendors and realized like this simple thing that we're not doing, we've got to make sure that we're doing that before we start building more on top of it. So were there any other challenges that you came across as you've gone through this journey, or anything that you wished you knew now that you didn't know then as you tried to change each of your different companies and how they view data? Anybody?
Well, for me, it was actually how simple it was.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize this at the time, so I wish I knew this then, but focusing or defaulting to big data, it kind of disconnected me from the customer. So like my idea of the customer became really ethereal and like not really tangible. But working with small data, it forced me to really understand exactly what I know about them, exactly what their needs are, what we're collecting, and how we take action on that. So that's been I would say it has changed the trajectory of my career.
up to you, Martha.
I think that sometimes you can waste a lot of time going through trends, like big data, I need to be there, I want to predict consumer behavior. And that happened to me at some point, like at 3M, we wanted, since Latin America perspective, to try to predict our consumers' behaviors. And then we really understood that there was already a team across the globe working and acquiring all these technologies and doing it. So I think that you can do a lot with the small data you already have and develop your strategies, not to lose focus. Of course, big data is going to come to your companies and there's going to be a strong team to support it. So if you're interested more in this topic, there is a book from Martin Lindstrom that it's called Small Data, which talks about tiny clues to discover insights from your customers, so that could be good. And there's also a podcast that it's called The Brain Flames, that it's free in Spotify. So if you're interested, you can find more there.
I love the recos, thank you. And Don, yeah?
I forget the question.
Right, right? Yeah. So it was really like, as you've tried to move your organization to stop focusing so much on all of this data and how do we manage it, and getting them to really focus on the small data. What were some of the challenges that you encountered, or something that maybe you wish you knew now that you didn't know then as you started on that path?
I think not to be afraid of data is what I wish I knew then. I think, you know, coming at it from my vantage point, it gets scary when you think about how too much data can potentially suffocate creativity, both in terms of the communications you put out there, but in the way that you solve problems. And so what I tried to instill in the team, and I'm in this weird spot because I lead brand strategy as well as the internal and external creative product that we do, was I needed to try to harness everything and get everybody aligned on the same page. And so we just did very basic brand health studies. We did quant and qual, and then just tried to zero in on, again, I'm sorry I'm being redundant, but what is the real problem that we have to solve? And for us, there's two kinds of people that play fantasy sports right now. There's daily fantasy, which is what we offer. It gives you the ability to play every day in many sports, or once a week, say, for a sport like football. And then there's season-long fantasy, which is what most people are experienced playing, which is when you draft your team at the beginning of the year, and then you're stuck with that team for the rest of the year. And if someone gets injured in the early parts of the season, you're SOL because your lineup is messed up for the rest of the year. And what we found was that both cohorts are looking for the exact same thing out of their experience. People who have played daily fantasy see that it's a social game. You can play against friends. You can play contests against people of the same skill level, that it's not complicated. Season-long people who have never played daily fantasy don't realize that that's there. So we were able to recognize they're looking for the same thing. There's awareness about what we have among certain people, and those other people who are looking for the same thing don't realize we have that. So all we had to do was just start shining a light on the league's product that we have that allows you to play against friends.
Don, where'd you get that insight? What led you to that? What told you? I mean, because you're sort of finding negatives there. You're finding things that they're not getting.
Yeah. We did a very basic quantitative brand health study that DraftKings had never done before. It's you know, in a room full of data experts here. It's very basic stuff that we brought to a startup environment that had all this information. And we just did a quant study and backed it up with qualitative just to make sure we were deriving the right insights out of it. And it was quite black and white. And it was, again, surprisingly obvious that we need to create awareness for our products that most people didn't know about, but having it in black and white allowed us to get aligned on the same page.
So you were asking the users at some point directly in order to tell you which of these data points mattered and what they meant.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. I think we might have some time for questions.
Yeah, we do. Other questions about this?
I feel like we've got to have some questions out there for these guys with data. But, you know, yeah, go ahead.
John.
Don, I'll put the creative guy on the hot spot. How do you get your creative team to actually use data to inform what they do?
Every creative person wants a very clear brief in as small a box as possible. And so by focusing on those little insights and forcing the marketing team to lock in a very clear creative brief, you motivate creative people because now they know exactly what they have to do. Whereas in my past life, I was at a big agency for plus 20 years. It's amazing how often clients, I'm a client now, stuff too much information in, and then you're just trying to catch lightning in a bottle. I'd rather, and we would all rather, just know what do we have to do, and then we can solve that.
Hi, I'm Meg Ellis with Live Oak Brewing Company right here in Austin. For somebody just getting started with some of these ideas of looking at little data, I'm thinking about all the data that I don't have, right? Like, how do I get all this demographic information, even to inform small marketing decisions? What, in you guys' minds, are the key pieces to start with or to start collecting or looking at?
Good question. I would actually start with what you do have. And make sure that you understand like what you have and where does it actually live. Because too often, because we have multiple channels, the data lives within that technology or within that channel, but does it actually connect with with everything all the marketing systems that you have? I would start there and make sure that you have 100% clarity in terms of where that lives and then how it communicates with each other. Is it when you push it out to a channel? Is it like unidirectional or is it bidirectional? That's extremely important. Like things like that. Like fully understand that before you go out and try to collect more.
I also think that, for example, we bought a media study. Really, it was not that expensive, and you tell them who you think your persona is, and they analyze their media consumption, and they give like a really good example, and they put the face of Prince Charles and Ozzy Osbourne, and they say they are the same age, they live in the same place, but I mean, one watches maybe a History Channel and the other one MTV. So this study helps you assess and go ask the people what are the right media channels across the whole different medias, TV, digital, magazines, print media. So this gives you also an analysis. If you would reach this audience, how much money can you get back to your category? So it's a very complete analysis, and then after you get like the whole media consumption they make, you develop your strategy following these recommendations, and then you run a second study where you say, okay, my main channel, it's going to be, I don't know, YouTube video campaign. So you run the campaign, and then they go to the houses of these people and ask them if they are consuming your product or not. Not exactly the brand, but they say, in the last days, have you bought bubblegum? Yes or no? Yes. And they collect, it's very interesting, they collect like the trash of people, like, okay, give me like the package, and you see now the brand that it is. So in that way you can measure if your efforts and the recommendations they're doing, and it's actually not that expensive. We did it with Kantar panel, so.
This is Shane from ArcBest. David, I really liked your description at the beginning. Little data is humans can kind of conceive it, and big data is for the machines, and I really dig that. But I wonder how you can keep little data in its ecosystem without it being sort of anecdotal. Like at the point of you've got enough statistical significance to say that we can do something with this little data. Doesn't it also play into this bigger data question? Like some of the influences of these little data decisions factor into the big data question as well?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that goes down to syntax. I mean, like, if we really talk about it or think about it, things like small data or big data, it kind of becomes existential. It's kind of like when kids ask like why, and then why that, and then why that. Like soon you're wondering like what's the meaning of life. So like, what is the difference between small data? When does that become big data? Is there like a medium data in between? Is it like big data with like a little bit of sprinkling of little like small data? I don't know where that delineator is. So yeah, I would just say that if you can understand the data and how it interacts with other things, with other elements within your business, then let's just consider that small data.
I think we need a medium data panel next round.
And we're going to continue this in the roundtable at the end of the morning. Valarie and panel, thanks very much.
Yes, thank you guys.